And welcome everyone to a March Madness Champ Week chat. I'm Andy Katz, pleased to be joined by Dan Gavitt, the Senior Vice President of Basketball at the NCAA. He is at the Men's Basketball Selection Committee headquarters as they put together the bracket this week before Selection Sunday, seeding and bracketing. A lot to unpack here, Dan. Let's first deal with how many teams were in the field on the first ballot.
Well, good morning, Andy. It's good to see you. Very exciting week here in Carmel, Indiana, as we get ready for tipping off March Madness next week. And of course, the selection show on CBS at 6 o'clock on Sunday. The committee convened yesterday and their initial ballot, they put 19 at-large teams into the field on the initial ballot. I don't think any of those teams would surprise any fans or coaches, players at this point. That was the initial ballot, and they subsequently voted in 4 more teams. So currently there are 23 at-larges in the field.
I don't know if you have this number off the top of your head, but what about under consideration? How big is that pool?
Yeah, we do. It's 38. So that was populated yesterday on the initial ballot as well by the committee. They voted 38 teams now currently on that under consideration board. Of course, many of those teams will end up being automatic qualifiers as well as they win their conference championships this weekend. But that's the pool of candidates for at-large consideration at this point.
And how many lines has the committee seeded so far?
Just one. Last night, they did seed initially the #1 seed line. Of course, that's initial because none of the teams that are on that line right now, 3 of which would surprise no one, and even the other teams that were close that would be otherwise, in the 2 line, possibly have played a game yet this week. The quarterfinals starting today and tomorrow. So a lot of games and results still to be considered before finalizing the #1 seed line. But we need to start putting them in place, at least initially and contingently, and that started last night.
So you mentioned the first 3. Obviously, those are obvious to everyone. Been pretty consistent, but how many more teams are at least even being considered for a 1 line?
I think 3 or 4 probably. Again, we haven't seeded the initially the #2 line yet, so probably a little premature to say definitively. But looking at the discussion last night, I'd say there's probably another 3 or 4 that are in contention.
The other thing, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, it just feels like this year, based on where the consensus ones, at least some of them are, that it's kind of almost easier for the committee because they sort of just fit in geographic pockets more so than we've had in the past. How much do you think that is true, that it just happens that it just worked out that way?
Yeah, it is more coincidence than anything, and the committee doesn't take into consideration specifically, placing a team in a region outside of just following their principles and procedures, which is to say that, the overall #1 seed gets to choose where they go. And then the second seed overall, is assigned to the next closest geographic region and on down the line. But you're right, certainly the way the regional is set up this year, given the teams that are in contention, it feels like they may end up in a very natural place for their fans.
Hey, one other quick question on the bracket that I think some people may be confused by is once we get through the top couple lines, some of the other regions that aren't going to have a 1 or a 2, what are the determinations for which of the highest seeds sort of go to that? Like, is it the 4s, the 5s, the 3s, on some of those other first and second rounds that don't have 1s and 2s?
Well, as you know, Andy, the bracketing process is pretty automated. We have, very defined principles and procedures that assign teams to a geographic region, to a region based on where they are on the seed list. It's also based on keeping conference opponents apart in some cases in the first 4 seed lines. So the teams in the same conference would be assigned to different regions if they're in the top 4 seed lines. And then avoiding conference opponents earlier in the tournament should they have played, 2 or 3 times, for example, during the regular season. So it's pretty automated, yet, the goal of it is to try to keep teams as close as possible to their campus and natural geographic region so that they can have their fans be able to be there to support them easily.
Hey, one last thing before we get to a couple of very quick topics. We say this every year, but I feel like we have to re-educate everybody. Because everyone loves to say, oh, you know, today's game in tournament, wherever, is an elimination game. Help everyone understand that you don't have a big whiteboard out there and you're literally not erasing a team, even if they were to lose a particular game today or tomorrow.
So true, so true. And, you know, I think it's probably a result of bracketologists who do a fantastic job of, you know, tracking college basketball and how the tournament might play out. You know, their role and shtick, I guess, in some ways is to, you know, kind of project based on single results, what that does to a team's resume and their odds, you know, for getting into the field. That's not the way the committee works at all, as you know. You know, teams play 30+ games in the regular season. And a game played this week in the conference tournament is no more important than a game played a month ago. In some cases, it's important because of where the game may fall in the quads, because most of these games are on neutral sites this week. But there is no extra weight given to any single result in this conference championship week. You know, it's only one of 30+ games that are considered by the committee in the full body of work and evaluating a team.
All right, so we know how great March Madness rates. I understand that the regular season ratings are in. How were they?
Really favorable, Andy. Men's college basketball regular season television ratings this year were up 2% over last year. It was the most viewed men's college basketball regular season in 5 years. And even in a very important demographic, the 18 to 34 age group was up 14%. So younger viewers tuning in more frequently was a really positive story. And women's college basketball, even more substantial gains. Women's college basketball regular season was up 48% over last year, the most viewed season in 6 years. Of course, due in no small part to the brilliance of Caitlin Clark and the Iowa women's basketball team. If you take her games out of that equation, women's basketball was still up 10%, but you could say that she probably accounted for almost 40% of the overall game of women's college basketball ratings. So both championships, I think, are looking at really exciting few weeks ahead. Based on the regular season, I think we'll see incredible ratings and viewership and engagement in the month of March and early April, like we did during the regular season.
Yeah, no question for television partners. It's going to be a great month. How about for advertisers and the corporate partners? Some new partners this month. What kind of advertising we want to see on the various networks?
Yeah, well, our partners at CBS Sports and TNT Sports announced yesterday that the ad inventory for the men's championship is basically sold out for this year, which is incredible. You know, the demand and interest from our corporate champions and partners is high, as well as other advertisers. We announced just recently a couple of new corporate champions and partners, the Home Depot and Geico. You'll see some really creative advertising, I think, from both of those new partners. And of course, Cap One just has incredibly creative ads throughout the tournament and March Madness, and you'll see some very entertaining, I think, ads coming from those and many other of our valued corporate champions and partners. So makes for a fun month, both what goes on the court and what goes on off the court, and can't wait to tip it off.
All right, so we'll chat again with the committee on Friday. What needs to get done on Thursday?
Well, we'll see, select more teams today and then seed a couple more lines at least. Some point, probably, by this afternoon, we're going to have to slow down a little bit and not get too far ahead of ourselves, of course, because there's so many games that are being played here in the next couple of days. As we noted, no one game means more than another necessarily, but at the same time, you don't want to get too far ahead of yourself in the process before we have more complete looks at a team's full body of work. So a little more selecting, a little more, initial contingent seeding, a lot of game watching, and we'll keep on rolling, getting ready for Sunday.
All right, can't wait. And we'll check in on Friday. Appreciate it, Dan.
Thanks, Andy. Have a great day.